How do you learn who you really are? It's not found in books. It's found on the battlefield. All right. What's up, Shelly? Do you like the full name, Shelly Settles, or just Shelly Settles?
Shelly Settles is fine. Shelly Settles is how you find me on social media.
That's awesome. All right. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited to go over some of the stuff that you've got going on in your life, how you're making impact, what the goal is to have more people know who you are, the movement you're creating, and probably the gajillion miles that you've covered on a motorcycle. So we'd like to hear more about you. Please tell some of your story, and then let's tell people who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. Well, you start early, but I don't want to say I was born at an early age because that's everybody's story. But I was born from really kind of mismatched parents. I had a Catholic dad and a Mormon mom, and they both threw the baby out with the bathwater. And we just kind of had to pick our own path. So I had kind of a religious experience when I was a teenager and made the hair stand up on the back of my head. So it's like, I have to find out more about this. And so I invested the next, 30, 40 years of my life following that path. And it did not lead where I wanted it to go. Now, having said that, I am a licensed, ordained motorcycle riding grandma. I've ridden all over the United States and down through Latin America. We lived in Boquete, Panama a couple of years. But now I find myself doing a lot of work with women who maybe came out of some religious confusion, some religious abuse. They're carrying this lack of self-worth because in the church, and again, not every church is like this, but in the churches I found myself in, women were second-class citizens. And I don't buy that. I don't see that in the word. So I do a lot of work with women to help them understand how amazing they are, how creative, how valuable, how equal they are, without using any of the trigger words like equal rights and that sort of thing. Because a lot of people who are in that particular movement do so by bashing men. And that's not my heart either, So
makes it hard to call it equal if we're trying to make it unequal.
Exactly. And so I, again, not very traditional in my Christian stance, but I'm very inclusive. I don't think that there's an us and them, there is in the church. I don't think there's supposed to be. So I don't mind people living their lifestyle and their authentic truth. That's between them and who they answer to. I'm not going to try to fix anybody because I don't think anybody's broken. I think they're lost in many ways because they've been trying to conform to some rules that were arbitrary and man-made. I think they haven't understood. Like, for example, my parents, I kind of told you their religious background, but they were also products of the Depression. So the stories that I heard, my dad lived in a chicken coop. They had to, eat something even if it was bad, and they mismeasured the salt because they couldn't throw anything out. And dinner was sometimes just milk sogged with, or bread sogged with milk. I've heard all those stories.
How did they get to school? I heard it was uphill.
Both ways, barefoot,
ways.
Yes.
No shoes. I heard all about it.
Absolutely. Same deal. Well, while my parents who loved me very much, and I had a good childhood, don't get me wrong, but they were trying to instill in me a value for money. I mean, they're blue collar workers. My dad was a welder. My mom, was a meat wrapper. Very blue collar, salt of the earth people. But in trying to establish an appreciation for money, what I really heard was I wasn't worth a whole paper towel. When you go and you take something to pick up a mess, well, you need the whole thing, tear it in half, the little slivers of soap that you could no longer hold on to when you're taking a shower. They all went into a jar in the utility room where you put hot water in. It was our own soft soap, years before soft soap. So I grew up with some of that programming. Paradigms is what they're called, but it really is a thought that you don't even know is your own belief. It was just kind of forced on you like computer programming. And I know, Rick, you do a lot of work in this area as well. So my story is not unique to you. It's not unique, period. But I was an adult, well into my adult And I don't know how many people will listen to audio or versus seeing a picture of me, but I've got some Nordic blonde in my hair and a significant amount of it. So when I woke up to the fact that I am not living the life that I dreamt I would be living, that I thought I would be living, and that I had an option to change, man, there were a lot of decades that I had already gone through. So part of my message is life is too short. If you're not happy for any reason, figure out why, figure out an alternative, and change it. Everybody has this innate power to be living far above where they're currently living. And I didn't know that. Now that I know that, I want everybody to know that, because it makes a difference in the most simple things. I mean, going to sleep at night, just being at peace, knowing that every day is getting better and better. Just knowing that if I have a problem, then that problem exists here, but so do the solutions. So do the answers that I'm looking for. I don't have to look outside myself. And we all have that ability to tap into our creativity, tap into our intuition, tap into our mental faculties. You know, we got 6 of them. Tap into those and let those drive us rather than just being a ping pong responding to the news reports, because that's how I live my life.
There's a lot there to unpack. I'm excited where the direction's going to go here. Now that I hear where you're going, I'm like, all right, I see where we're going, Shelly. You're right. I'm going to just grab a couple pieces and just let you take the wheel on this one. I think that you're right. When you came from a place with parents who have a depression mindset, the scarcity is going to be ingrained into you. But the reason was not because they were trying to hurt you. This was their good intentions to try to teach you hey, we have to always be prepared for losing everything, and you just never know what it's going to be. And I don't want you to be in the situation I was in. So be able to manage in the worst of situations and worst of times. Their intentions were good.
Absolutely good.
But one thing that I found in this business, especially working through rewiring belief systems, is that oftentimes the best intentions create the hardest generational curses.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. The one comment that I remember hearing over and over and over again, and it didn't matter if I wanted to buy a totally useless trinket or school clothes, was if you've lived without it this long, chances are you don't need it. So
what an interesting belief system.
Well, it works to help you curb spending that's inappropriate or unnecessary, but it also saddles you with this inability, even when you have pockets full of money, to buy something. Because is it really necessary? No. So you buy things for other people, but you never buy things for yourself, because somehow, again, if a girl is not worth a whole paper towel, why would she be worthy of a new coat when the old one is serviceable? Make it a little repair. And that literally puts you in prison, and we live our life out like that until suddenly we don't lift our head off the pillow anymore. But what do we have to show for ourselves? We haven't. Ebenezer Scrooge, Christmas Carol. Love that story. He had all this money, but was he happy? No. He found happiness when he learned to be a little bit more generous with that money and to brighten the lives of other people. That is the only answer in life.
Yeah. I've worked with enough millionaires who I thought the money was going to work, but my relationships are struggling. My kids and we don't connect very well. My wife and I are always fighting. Things are not going well. What am I missing? You think the money would solve it all. And it's really funny that whether you're going for I need the abundance or I'm going to focus on scarcity, it doesn't seem like anybody's really happy.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Warrior, thank you so much for being a part of the information that we have. And you're part of our story as we are a part of yours. It's very much an honor to be able to connect with each other. If you want to know more or you want to get started with working with me or working with our warriors so that you can begin your path to authenticity, strength, leadership, and accountability, this is the way. Together, we are way stronger. Now you get to choose. Do you go forward or keep doing what you've always done? If you stay where you're at, hey, click on some of the stuff and follow what it is. We got motivational stuff. We've got podcasts. We got more things. Just subscribe and do the stuff and we'll keep you updated. But if you want to start going in, start jumping into what our programs offer and start your journey and being the hero in your own story.
And that is because they're looking for it in the wrong place. You think a Maserati is going to buy you happiness, so you get that fancy car. It doesn't buy you happiness because it's still you inside.
Wait, Maseratis? Wait, those don't buy happiness? Wait a second.
I'm
Hold
told.
on. Hold on. How do we know? Let's test this out a little bit. Shelly, we're going to get a Maserati, and we're going to see if we can find happiness in this thing. We're going to see.
The problem with that theory is put in your favorite car. Maybe it's a Lamborghini that really provides the happiness.
Sure.
I don't know. But
listen, you want a racetrack. You want a racetrack with a Lamborghini. I bet you'd have some happiness. I'm telling you.
I think I might get into my terror barrier. A little bit more core than I want to handle. Put me on a motorcycle, I'm fine. But the happiness, that's got to come from within. Because if you get that new car, you're going to be all smiles and you're going to show it off for a couple of weeks. And then you know what? You're going to wake up one day and it's going to be, maybe it's this I need. And so you're constantly chasing something when happiness is a little like Dorothy and her ruby slippers had it all along. You're just looking in the wrong places. Unless you know the magic in you, unless you know that power in you. I want
to tap into that. Let's do that. There's a few. We're gonna do a thing. I already see. I want to tap into your wisdom in a little bit here because I'm gonna do some of my favorite exercises by the end of this, and so we're gonna have some fun together. But first, I want to get into one of your passions and kind of go back to this, the religious curses, like the parts where like people will have the religious guilt or the religious confusion or the religious abuse. And this poisons both sides, and definitely the idea of Eve was supposed to be the servant, or, even when it says in Genesis, the punishments for Eve, where it's like she'll have painful childbirth and she'll want to be in control of her husband, but he'll always rule over her. Like these punishments or these rules that are created that say like, you don't deserve the say, and you're pushing against this narrative. And I'd like to hear like your, I guess, journey or growth or perspective or evolution of figuring out like, that's not correct, but this is what seems more right. I'd like to hear your mission or your statement on that.
Well, basically in the word, God says he is love, he is light, and he's a consuming fire. All different scriptures, but that's who he defines himself as. And when I use the word he, I don't want to get into pronouns, but God is both male and female. If you go into the ancient Hebrew, the spirit is actually a feminine word, the word that is originally there. So God is both male and female, and that's how he created us in his image, with both the ability to create, the spirit is always longing for growth. It's always longing for expansion. If you're ever in contraction mode, then you're on the road to dying. That would be true of a garden plant. It's true of us as well. So I told you I had this kind of religious experience. I was in a fraternal organization that you jump around and you did little different offices. And I was, the door guard and this and that. And finally I was chaplain. And so I stood up on the podium, I gave my memorized prayer, and at the end of the meeting, I'd give my memorized closing prayer, and we'd all go home for the night. I was only in that organization because it was the social thing to do in a small town. One night was different. I stood up, I gave my memorized prayer, I sat down, and as soon as I sat down, I heard the audible voice to the part. I looked around to see if anybody else heard it. He said, "You pray to me, but you don't even know me." That's what set me on my quest. But I didn't have anywhere to know him. So I literally went home, got the phone book, went to the yellow pages, kind of did that, all right, God, show me where to go, and put my finger down. It fell between two very fundamentalist, hardline churches. And I don't want to give the denomination, but I called one, and I was clearly a young girl on the phone. They didn't give me the time of day. Where's the love of God in that? I called the other one. They put the pastor right on. He visited with me. He treated me like a real individual. So I started going there, and I, tried to get my sister to go there, try to get my friends to go there. The problem is it was all hellfire and damnation. Where's the love in God in that? Now the people were showing love, but something didn't add up. So I would read my Bible on my own, and then I would go to church and hear things pretty much the opposite of what I was seeing when I read it. And I was giving all my power away, because this is my exact thought, Rick. Well, these people know what they're doing. And these are professionals. They've been going to church for years. This is your second month, and so I gave away all my power, and I discounted the fact that I was hearing the Spirit. So again, not a unique story, but I stayed in church, even got married in that particular church. So I do have fond memories, but I stayed in church because now I had a relationship with him. I did not want to screw it up. I did not want to disappoint God, as if I could, as if he had some expectations of me other than being his daughter, perfectly created. So I had that religious, got to do everything right to please God attitude that a lot of people spend their whole lives doing. My husband and I would fight on the way to church, and then we'd open the church doors and put his plastic smile on our face. We were home group leaders. He played the worship music. We did the missionettes. We plugged ourselves in 100%. For what? To be on a rat race where the subtle messages were that you're only pleasing to God if you continue to perform. I thought it said we were already loved by God. I thought it said we were already blessed by God. I thought it said that he provides all of our needs according to his riches and glory. But instead, it's like, well, there's this umbrella of protection and you can't get out from underneath the umbrella. Otherwise, Satan will smack you. Well, those I found out years later after delving into some church history were man-made ideas. The Hebrew, the Aramaic, the Greek, the original languages, perfect. But they're pictorial language, and it just did not work well being translated into Latin and then closed up for 1,000 years where nobody can scrutinize. And during that 1,000 years, called the Middle Ages, called the Dark Ages, people were afraid not to be part of the main church body. Because you could be killed for dissenting the church. Galileo was imprisoned for suggesting that, the earth revolved around the sun instead of the other way around. So what we have now as our church doctrine has been abused. And if you want to say the word of God is perfect, then great. It's not the Bible, because we had the word of God before we had the Bible. We didn't have the Bible until, 400 years into church history. So that can't be the word of God. So we've given some reverence to a Bible, which I love, don't get me wrong. But when the translators came along to translate, for years, people weren't allowed to read the Bible, which possession of the Bible was illegal. Okay, they didn't have money. They were pretty illiterate, wouldn't have done a lot of people any good. But to the degree that you could have, it was discouraged that you read the Bible. And so, I'm getting my Gutenberg Bible and all these, timelines, perhaps not exactly right. But by the time that it got translated into English, we had years and years and years of translators who were indoctrinated to think that it means this. So they made the scriptures mean that rather than going back to the original Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic. So along those lines, the idea that women are subservient to men, do you know what that really is, Rick? That's the fact that the female spirit is like the mind here. You've got this representing your conscious mind, your rational mind, your thinking mind. It can accept and reject. Your subconscious mind is subjective. It can only accept. So when you have a woman and she's lying with a man, she accepts his seed. She doesn't have the ability to say, no, I don't want your kid. I want his kid. She's got to sleep with the other guy. She wants his kid. Some people don't even know who their dad is because their mom took the seed of lots of men. That's the submissive. It's the female energy that is submissive to the man's, not that she is any less, merely saying that the word of God, we each have I got to choose my words carefully because I'm opening up a can of worms, but you have male and female capabilities inside of you, Rick. So do I. we can plant, just like a man plants a seed and comes out with a literal baby, we can plant with our mind into our subconscious mind a new belief that's going to serve us better. We can rewire those thought patterns. That's the receptivity, that female part of us that's going to say, whatever you plant here, I'm going to produce. So when you have that beautiful imagery in the original scriptures and a male-dominated church translates that into English, you've got women need to be silent in church. Are you kidding me? That's not what it says. Why would God, who created male and female, flow beautifully through a congregation of people and then come up to a woman and go, can't flow through you, you're a female? That makes no sense. But we're taught not to question these ideas. Again, that slippery slope idea came out of, the pulpit back before people could read, and they knew better than to question authority, because then they were met with hellfire and damnation, or imprisonment, or loss of property, or death. So anyway, I'm very passionate about all this. I wouldn't say that everybody I work with have those religious issues. I'm just saying that I'm surprised how many people in the church do. And some people are very content to stay there, and that's fine. But those who aren't, when they start thinking and using their brain and realizing that maybe I've been sold a bill of goods, maybe I am capable, maybe I am worth something, maybe I don't need to ask permission for the air I breathe, then life becomes pretty amazing, because you realize what you were created to be and to do and to have. Why are we settling? Now, I can get on my soapbox, but I would much rather you point me in the direction that you want to hear.
No, I actually, it's one of those funny things. I'm gonna give a couple of my pieces on this journey too. I love what you're saying, because my connection with God is also not as conventional as a church would try to make you have. And so I'm finding a lot of the same things too, where I have at least the same belief system. I'm going to go through the stuff that you said, because you just unloaded like a full page of stuff right there. So, I found the same thing too. If you're going to call yourself a Christian, you should at least read what Christ did. I think you should start there. Like at least start at Matthew and take it to John. At least get that far and just go like, what did they say that Christ did? Like, who was that guy? If you're a Christian, did you read about Christ? You don't have to read the whole Bible. Just at least read Christ and start there. At least get like the foundation for the guy. At least start there. Okay. Now, this was funny where you said, I read my memorized prayer. I read my memorized prayer, and then I got off the thing and I read my memorized prayer. And this is where, I'm grabbing just the first Bible I had near me, which is NLT, but I know there's a lot of different translations. So this is obviously one of the translations, but the concept and principles still ring true. So I'm with you. We're like, this is translated fucked. I know that. I know it's not correct. I got Shelly Settles. I probably shouldn't say fucked, but that this is translated oddly, but is the principle sound still? And so let's go to Matthew 6 and then jump right into Matthew 6:9. And this is where it's the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You know the prayer. Everybody says it over and over again. But if you read Christ and you go literally 2 verses before that to 7, when you pray, don't babble on and on as the Gentiles do. They think their prayers are answered by merely repeating their words again and again. Don't be like them, for your Father knows exactly what you need before you ask him. So Jesus, this is Jesus talking, says literally right before the Lord's Prayer that everybody just runs on repeat all day long, says, don't repeat this over and over again. This is why I would say if you're a Christian, start with Christ. Like at least start with him, because he's telling you what to do. Now, I have a spiritual perspective on this one. I openly don't understand spirit world rules. I have no idea what the whole game plan between the bet of God and Satan for why our existence is the way that it is, for free will. And, you know, why did Jesus have to come down and be brutally killed to reset a rule that God made? I don't know. I don't know why we're doing this way. I don't know what bet it was that a third of heaven was like, I know God and I'm leaving with that guy. I don't know the rules. I have no idea. It's not my job to. This is beyond me, and I can understand if they operate in 4D or 5D, I'm a 3D creature. I don't get it. So I'm leaving that to other people, which goes right into the part where I don't know why this is why it is. But I do know that my role is going to be somehow in the rule book. This is a big reason why I think in the spirit world rules, there's a rule book. Now, is it the whole Bible? I can argue no. There are rules in Deuteronomy that I don't agree with. And Exodus gets real weird for me sometimes. There's stuff in here that I'm like, I don't know if I agree with these rules. Old Testament is confusing for that time, but start with Christ. And even with this, I believe that the rules would be, if you read what Christ says, you'll find the actual rules for the game here. Well, which commandments are the most important, Jesus? You remember. Which ones are the most important? I'm going to trap the Jesus. He says there's really just, let's start with the main two, okay? Let's just keep it to two. If you can keep it to these two, you're doing better than most, okay?
If you can keep it to those two, you fulfill the entire law.
You're crushing it. You're smashing it. Now, there's loopholes to it, of course. Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. Well, some people love to fight. So that may not always be accurate because not everybody loves to fight, but you do, they don't. It's not always great, you know? So there's lines at some point, but at least we can start like, do you like your stuff stolen? No. Well, then don't steal. Do you want someone to try and hook up with your partner? Oh, no. Well, then don't try and hook up with someone's partner. Like, can we just keep it to the basics here? Just keep it to like, do you want that done to you? You want you to be canceled? I don't want to be canceled. Then don't cancel people. Like, let's keep it very simple here. So first rule, love God with your whole mind, body, heart, and soul. Let's just do all the parts of it. Love God with all the parts of you. And then second, love thy neighbor as you love yourself. At least do the golden rule. He's like, you do the golden rule, you're doing better than most. That's at least better. You're trying. Let's keep it simple here. That's Christ. He didn't give you the 10 commandments. He gave you 2. And even those, very tricky for people to follow.
The 10 commandments were given to the Jews, so you wouldn't fall under that anyway. And one could argue whether or not we're supposed to, follow that. I would say the Apostle Paul, there's neither male nor female, neither, bond or free, Jew or Greek. We have tried to put God in our box when God doesn't fit in any box. But God is also not sitting out there somewhere on a cloud. The kingdom of God, according to Jesus, is inside of you. When I used to run a Bible college for an international minister and opened the Bible college, frankly, in Phoenix, Arizona. And I don't have my coffee cup here, but I had a clear teacup, a clear cup. And I would come into class and we would just talk about who they are. And I would have hot water. And I would be slowly dipping my tea bag in as I talked to them, and they could see the water changing. And I love that analogy because when you're in Christ, we don't call that tea hot water with tea. We call it tea. Your identity becomes your God. Your God becomes your identity. There needs to be a marriage of love, joy, peace. If that's the God you're following, those characteristics need to be in your life as well. You can't say, I love God, but I hate people, because that is inauthentic. It doesn't jive. It doesn't work. You cannot separate God from his people. And I'm not saying his people as in the Jews or even the church. I'm talking about his creation. Mm-hmm. He loves every single one of us. And we're the ones who have screwed things up by making a religion out of it, by making an organization out of it. Now that we have to build these huge buildings and, keep all the programs running. And I'm not saying that programs don't do some good. They sure do, but they're answering a problem that we created in the first place.
Yeah, sounds pretty governmental to me.
Yes, it does. And in the New Testament, the the Jews, the people who, the religious leaders, not the average Jewish person, but the religious leaders, they don't have a good track record.
Well, it turns out if you're going to be a Christian, who killed Jesus?
Jesus said, no one kills me. I lay my own life down. No one takes it from me.
Right. Well, when it came down to the Barabbas debate there, who was the loudest?
Right.
It was the leaders,
It
the
was
church
the religious
leaders at the time.
leaders. Absolutely.
And this is like, so if you're saying you need to be obedient to the church, you need to be, bowing to the church, you need to do church programs, you need to be doing it the church way. It's like, well, what church did Jesus go to?
Exactly. He didn't. I don't think he started out to create another religion.
No. And so he would go to temple once in a while, but he prayed in the field and he'd go and pray out in the open. He'd leave me alone for a little while. I'm going to go pray in private. Like the church of God wasn't in the buildings. And that's what he was telling you. Even when like there are people that do like ridiculous, I'll call it out, ridiculous things where you see people pretend to speak in tongues and make a fool of themselves when that's not really happening. Especially when I was like, I got to look this up. When it goes into the gifts of God and speaking in tongues. And like I was looking in, I'm like, is it like just making a lot of noises? And I was like, I got to look into this for a little bit. And it said if somebody had the gift of tongues, when they would speak, all people could understand them. Like it was something that God would speak through them, and no matter what language you spoke, you would understand what they were saying.
And there were documented cases of that. Now, the Bible college that I went to and ran after I graduated taught tongues, and they taught that kind of tongues, and they taught tongues as a prayer language that it bypasses the devil and keeps him in confusion. It's just you and God.
Shelly, I don't, as if I don't have any clue what you're talking about.
Right.
So if someone's like, all right, they're going to teach tongues. What I saw with tongues is somebody like will touch somebody and they go, and they're like, okay, that's tongues? Is that tongues?
What they taught was that was a prayer language, individuals that he gave to you.
I just made that shit up right now, Shelly. That wasn't a prayer language. I was just making sounds.
I don't subscribe to that anymore. That's one of those things that I have moved away from. That's what I was taught. So I dutifully did it. But you know what? If you don't have to pray above your belly button to talk to God, why do you need that? He knows your thoughts, your needs before you even express them.
That's what Jesus just said.
Is, again, they take a phrase about the diversity of tongues and couldn't explain it any other way. So you have a camp in church that believes this way and a camp in church that believes that way. I think we're all getting caught up in red herrings. That has nothing to do with who we are in Christ. And I will go you a step further, Rick. We were created in God's image.
I agree.
The fall didn't change that. I thought that once Adam fell, then we're now being reproduced in Adam's lineage. And so that's why Jesus had to come back, is to pull us out of Adam's lineage and, put us in Christ's lineage. That doesn't do any good for that 10-year-old girl who lived at the same time as Christ, maybe died a week later, over in North America, a little Indian girl. She had no chance to know anything about God. She had no chance to know anything about Jesus. She's condemned to hell now. She's already been to hell and led the captives free. So she's got to stay there. And nothing makes sense.
I love when people say, I love when people do grand judgment. I really think people should just start with Matthew here, at least get into the Sermon on the Mount, because Jesus is pretty solid on going, well, if you're going to say who's going to hell and who's not going to hell and who's good and who's bad and who's righteous and who's the sinner, Matthew chapter 7, the very first verse, do not judge others and you will not be judged. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard that you use in judging is a standard by which you will be judged. And then it gets into the speck in my eye versus the log in your eye. But then you just go right to the very, near the end of chapter 7. I'm in the same sermon here where he goes, true disciples at verse 21. Not everyone who calls out to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who actually do the will of my Father will enter heaven. On judgment day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, we prophesied in your name, and we cast out demons in your name, and we performed many miracles in your name. Or I'll add in, we picketed and called many people pieces of shit in your name, and we judged people and said they're going to hell in your name because I don't think you had it under control, so I got it for you.
Yep.
And we did all of the things in your name. We killed in your name, and we kicked people's asses in your name, and I spit on whores in your name. I did all of this in your name.
That makes me so sad, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
But I will reply, I never knew you. Get away from me, you who break God's laws.
Yep.
This is Jesus talking. And so here we are feeling, because I did something in Lord, Lord, in your name, that I am one of yours. And I have that righteous pride that I can say who's going to hell, and I can say who's good and bad. And I have the power of God because I have a book, or I had water on me, or something. And this is one of those things where if you read Christ, he's like, don't do that. That's not us. That's not, which Christ are you following? Because that's not me, man.
Christ would be very offensive in most churches. He wouldn't be welcome there.
He pissed off everybody. How come people don't know that Christ was a gangster? He pissed off everybody.
Absolutely.
And so if here you are sounding rebellious against the church, it sounds like somebody I know.
Well, I would like to say thank you, but I'm a little uncomfortable with sounding like I don't love the church. I love the church more than most people do.
Which
in
church?
my opinion, because I'm trying to protect the true church, not
which
the
one
building that people go to.
Which?
We're the church. We're the.
In which case, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. It's breaking the rules, Shelly.
Yep.
The building is the church. The religion is the faith. It is not through Christ and God and through you. It's through the pastor. It's through the organization. It's through make sure you're tithing to us. It's through make sure you do it this way. And it's through make sure you're doing the door opening. And it's through make sure you're running the worship group. And it's through make sure you're doing it the way we tell you to.
And make sure you go out and get others to be as miserable as you are and bring them into the fold.
Absolutely.
I have a problem with that.
Correct. Because Jesus wasn't forcing anybody. And this is why it's interesting. You don't use shame. You don't use judgment. You don't use guilt. You use choice. The game seems to be free will.
Whosoever will. Do you know how many times that's said in the Bible? Whosoever will.
It's choice. That's the game. If you look at this is when I wrote my first book, Everything is a Choice. I understand the game is free will. At least I don't know the rules, but I do know the wild card is you can choose whatever you want. You have a very limited amount of information you can comprehend, but you have unlimited resource to choice. Pick whatever you want to do. That seems to be where the game is. Do I know all the rules? I think in here, Christ is trying to say, this is the idea for the rules. Just do your best here. Do I know the system they have in judgment? I have no idea if it's a tally system and that's why all sin is equal. I have no idea. I don't know any of it. I have no idea.
Think sin is one of those concepts that was originally in the Word of God. And my pastor now explains this so well, and I believe it. I just can't explain it because I'm hardly a Greek and Hebrew scholar, but the whole concept of sin, I no longer can buy into the original sin concept. And again, I hold on to my Christianity very dear, but it's not traditional. And I cannot tell you how much freer I am. And I can hear the voice of the Lord so clearly. I mean, I heard it before. But when I was living in Panama, 10 years ago in Bible college, I heard one of my professors say, you know, there's this, this, and this. And then there's this whole group of Christians that don't even believe in hell. And I went, huh? And he didn't explain it anymore. And I went to all of his classes.
Shelly, what was the noise you made again when you heard that?
So I didn't want to buy somebody's book and hear their thoughts on it. I wanted to see in the Word of God whether there was a heaven and a hell. Now, there's words Hades. What is a little disingenuous. Is in the Old Testament, they call it Sheol, the grave. That's all it is, the
or
grave.
Gehenna, they had the place of burning,
But that was not in the Old Testament. Gehenna is
right.
a word used in the New Testament.
Fair enough.
Suddenly all of these translators will use a Gehenna as an imagery. That was the garbage dump outside of Jerusalem. But then they will substitute Hades, which is a Greek god, where suddenly we have the devil who's running hell. Well, if hell was created for the devil and his angels, he's not down there with the pitchfork and the lash whipping us into shape. He's a prisoner himself.
Don't forget his red Spanx, and he's trying to get you.
There you go.
Yeah, don't forget, he's going to get you.
So that version of hell is very Dante-esque and has to be rejected. But the New Testament, wherever Sheol would have been, is now hell, Hades, very loaded words, because they can be used to manipulate people. Give us more money in our coffers, and we'll pray and get you out of purgatory. All of these things, which it can make you really angry once you get your eyes open a little bit and start seeing the manipulations that have occurred. But my point is, I no longer remember. My point is that there's a vast difference between the original scriptures that were perfect, written in the original language, and the version we have, which we have venerated. Don't read, don't follow, don't believe. But, by golly, it's on our coffee table.
Sure.
We'll carry it proudly to church, but don't confuse me with what it says. I don't want to model my life after that. So there's a real disconnect, and that wasn't my original point. But I do love the message of Christ, but I cannot abide. Oh, I know what my original word was. I was down in Panama from that hell thing, and 10 years I've been trying to, look in the Bible and tell me, Lord, I'm listening. The first 6 months we lived in Panama, I needed to do nothing but go into Panama City occasionally and just sit with the word and just heal from running this Bible college 24/7. I was a labor of love, but you were burning the candle at both ends. And I got into the word, and I finally got so, I won't say confused, I would say adamant that the hell we were sold as Christians is not in the Bible. God says he doesn't judge. He's given all judgment to the Son. The Son says, well, I'm not judging. And if heaven and hell are in the presence of his holy angels, which it says in the Old or the New Testament, and the kingdom of God is within, it cannot be the Hades version of Greek mythology that we've been, told it was. Well, I felt so like I was betraying Christ, like I was betraying the church, like I was betraying the how can I call myself a Christian if I didn't believe in one of their foundational doctrines anymore? And I don't know where my husband was. He wasn't in the house. I threw myself across the bed and I just yelled and I cried to God. And I said, God, I cannot believe in hell unless you were to write it on the wall that I'm wrong. And then, okay. And I fell asleep in my tears. And the next day we were going to Panama City, about an 8-hour drive. And I told my husband what had happened. And I started, and this scripture says, and this scripture says, and this scripture says. I just vomited words all over him. And then exhausted again, I fell asleep. And a couple hours later, woke up as he was pulling off the road to get gas. And when I awoke, just before I even got my eyes open to see where we were, I think it was Panama or something like that, I heard the Lord as clearly as you and I have been talking here. You think I don't know what you believe? And I'm sending you to the nations. As soon as he said that, he didn't say, Shelly, you're right, Shelly, you're wrong. He said, you think I don't know what you believe? And it instantly put me at peace, and it just made me want to laugh at myself, because how wrapped up in ourselves are we that we think that what I believe, right or wrong, is the be-all, end-all. And yet he was trusting me to go to the nations. So once I pulled up that huge taproot that hell is a bill of goods that we've been sold, everything else come much easier. And I tell you, if it entreats love, joy, peace, you're on the right track. If it creates fear. I mean, how many times does the word say fear not? We're not supposed to fear him. It's perfect love. He only operates in perfect love. He doesn't put cancer on somebody to teach them something. He doesn't, take all their money away or burn their barley fields if they don't tithe. All of that is man-made crapola, if I may, that are not in the original word. And I call myself a Christian. I have to, because it's too much of the fabric of who I am, and I chose that life. And I'm not giving it up. I've had too many amazing, wonderful experiences in the word, but I can't be spoon-fed and told that it says something. If that's not what it says, I no longer play that game.
I love your story, and I appreciate it very, very much. I agree with you, too. And this is why I don't disagree with any of your saying. My journey has been the same. It is not the church that is my faith, and when even still in the Warrior's Way, our entire setup, while we do have to acknowledge spirit and soul, we have to acknowledge that I don't push faith religion. Like I have my number 2 guy is highly energy, highly spirit motivated and still prays, but doesn't pray like to God the way, a Christian says, I pray to God. I'm like, I don't know the rules here, but God's got some rules here I don't understand. So do your best, man. Like find your way. And the further that you go through, just like you said, the more I dig in and the further in I go, the more I truly find what I truly believe, and God will catch you. But you have to be looking, and people who think they know don't look. They don't challenge at all. And this is why one of the rules in the Warrior's Way is challenge everything. You should challenge my competency in my job. You should challenge your belief systems as far as faith. You should challenge anybody who says this is how you should be. You should be digging in like, is that really authentic to me? Is that really right for me? Does it fit? And the further you actually do the work, the more you'll find. And I agree with you very much with like the stories being told that are, this is how you should be, when it's people who are making up the rules for you.
When you take away original sin and you realize that you're perfect, but so is your neighbor who happens to be something else.
Shelly, can you tell, like, just because I know what it is, but I know that like there's people who, I have guys in my group who they don't follow this. So they may not know what original sin means. Can you at least help them know what that means? Because I know there's people who don't know.
Absolutely. Original sin is this concept that came out of the early church, but not the early church, that basically said because Adam and Eve sinned, we're now all sinners. And so as soon as that beautiful little baby is born, he is born a sinner and therefore has to be forgiven by Jesus. Otherwise, he's going to spend his life in hell, regardless of how good of a life he's been. You're either saved or you're not saved. And that puts people into 2 camps. Now, that was so odious to some early church leaders that they came up with this doctrine that said, well, not the babies. It's those that are of the age of accountability. Now, that line moves. Some people who might be mentally retarded might never reach the age of accountability, but God knows. In fact, that comes from the Jewish custom of bar mitzvah. When you're 13, 12, 13, the Jewish men would basically declare their 13-year-old son an adult. And in Jesus's day, that meant that 13-year-old boy, once he's been bar mitzvah, has the full rights of sonship, which means that he can make a contract and his father's legally bound. He represents the father in every way. So this age of accountability isn't anywhere in the Bible, but it was developed to try to make their concept of original sin a little less odious. Because I don't know if you have children. I have a couple of children. I have a couple of grandchildren. Never did I once hold that newborn baby boy and say, oh, what a dirty, rotten sinner. We don't. They're our children. They're beautiful. They're perfect. We count all their little toes and all their fingers, and we don't mind changing their diapers, and we don't mind getting up at 3:00 in the morning and feeding them. They're our children, our offspring. We should be offended by the idea of that little one is going to hell because, maybe they were born in China or the Middle East and they don't really have the ability to know what Jesus did for us. So Paul says, well, they can look up in the sky and they're not without excuse. They realize that there's a God and they're not him. And yeah, I can see that. But what if you take away the idea of original sin, judgment, all those things that we will read in our English Bible, but you won't read in the original scriptures? What if we take those away? Then do you need these other concepts? I don't think so. It comes back to love. And again, you're not going to steal from somebody if you love them. You're going to want the best for them if you love them. If you can practice love, and by the way, I don't think anybody can love God perfectly because,
How do you know?
Yeah. I mean, what does that look like? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We can all do our best. But the point is, God did everything for us. He didn't expect us to love him back. He didn't require it. He didn't demand it. When you had your children, I had my children. We hoped that they would grow up and be fine, upstanding citizens. But we know there's probably a few years in the teenage years where they're going to push back and think that we are scum of the earth for,
Is it how many few? I got 3 of these teenagers right now. How many few is this? I'm just curious.
Well, I don't know.
What's the few? I'm just curious. I got a 16 turning 17 on the 23rd, and then I've got a 15 and a 13. What's the few? I'm just making sure what I got here.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you, but we're all individuals. But during those few days, few months, few weeks, few years, they don't necessarily think that we know anything.
Of course not. That's a Mark Twain quote. The one where he's like, when I was 14, my dad was an idiot. He didn't know what he was talking about. He didn't know anything. He was ignorant. He was big-headed. And then by the time I was 21, it was amazing how much he's learned in the last 7 years.
I'd forgotten that. But see, God didn't have us so that we could love him back. He had us because he loved us. So I don't think that that's any different. Whatever, because most people are whatever brand of religion of the home they were born into. If you were in an atheist home, you might become a Christian, but chances are you're going to be programmed with the atheist thoughts. Does God love you any less? No. Because here's a story I used in Bible college, and it kind of fits here. Say imagine yourself on a bus, and there's a guy there and 3 kids that are just climbing up the walls or jumping on chairs. They're making a bunch of noise and rattling the seats, and he's ignoring their behavior. And you just get hot underneath the collar. Why doesn't this father take control of his son? Would your attitude be any different if you learned that he was coming home from the hospital where his wife had just died, and he was trying to figure out how he was going to raise these boys, how he was even going to tell them that their mama wasn't coming back? Would your attitude be a little bit different toward this man?
Depends on if you have empathy.
Well, most people, I think, could muster up a little empathy. Maybe you want to get off the bus at the first stop.
Tell me you don't know the people who, even after they know, it's still about them.
Well, okay, there are some. You got me there. But for the
majority would go slow down.
For the majority of people, we might even say, let me give your boys, some paper and pencils. Maybe they can draw. Would you mind if I did that? You would do something to try to help the father in that situation. You wouldn't just sit there with judgment and get angrier and angrier. Well, I don't care if his wife died. It all has to do with our perspective. The situation didn't change, but your awareness of the situation changed, and that allows you to have some more options in your disposal. So when you apply that to a religious realm, and again, I don't work with that many religious people, but the people that I work with all have the same issue. I work with a lot of people who know my background, but we've agreed to keep religion out of it because that's not what they believe in, and that's okay. I don't need to fix you because you're not broken. I can work with someone and help provide some awareness and some exercises and life hacks and rewiring the brain, the programming that we talked about early on. I can work with you whether you're from a religious camp or not religious camp. But if you're from a religious camp, I already know what some of your issues are. So it just gives us a little bit of a head start. I think I lost a little bit of my train of thought there. So I'm going to let you jump in and either put me back on course or point me in a different direction.
I noticed your train just goes. I I stopped taking notes after 4 pages in. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. Hopefully, and it comes out.
Yeah, there's a lot that you're unpacking here, and there's a lot of things that's tough to jump into because there's so many parts here that people are doing. And I think this is something I've noticed universally is that people will add in their stuff to make it so it makes sense. And that makes it often wrong, really wrong, because it's subjectively my own. And that gets really tricky. I rewatched a movie I didn't understand very much when I first seen it. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Interstellar. And it's Matthew McConaughey, and he goes into the black hole, and it ends up in like what would be considered a 3D version of like a 5D idea. And I remember first watching this. Spoiler, it's been out for like, 15 years. So if you haven't seen it yet, you're not going to watch it. So in any case, I remember like the scene where he goes into the black hole and then somehow he ends up behind his daughter's bookshelf, in multiple time frame dimensions. And at that point, when I was a young man, I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I'm like, you're going to tell me if I eject into a black hole, I won't be crushed immediately. I'll go teleport behind my daughter's bookshelf.
And be a mysterious voice that wrote in the dirt and dust.
I can use gravity as the dirt that I can write in, and I can knock books down. That's what a black hole does. Okay, cool. Like, I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I couldn't understand at all what the idea was. Well, I watched it recently, I think it was a couple weeks ago, and I understood what they were saying. We can't understand like 4D or 5D. And I had a buddy of mine do that. I wonder if I even have the picture that I did here, where it was like, here we go. I said, here's what it's like. You got people living their life like this. They're like, hey, dude, like lives his life in 2D. He's got his little house, his grass. He's like, hey, how you doing? Like, he's just, hi there. And he lives his whole life. He's got 2D. He's got his whole thing. And I was like, let me explain to you what this is. This 3D image here. I'm going to explain to you what this cylinder is. I'm going to explain this to you. And my dude here is going to go like, oh, so it's this thing right here, right? That's what it is? Like, well, technically, yes, but no, it's also this. And so how do I explain 3D to a guy who operates in 2D? And it's the same concept of the idea behind the bookshelf is we can kind of control time, and we needed a thing to happen in time. So we'll control the time, space, gravity continuum, but it's in a 5D scale that we have to turn into a 3D model. Because how do I explain this to this? Well, how do I explain even further dimensions than this? And so I started to understand they have to try to figure out, how do I quantify and translate something that there's no way to conceive where you're at. You won't understand what a fifth dimension is because you're still in 3D. You won't understand it. And so that made it easier for me to quantify, well, why did Jesus have to come down and do it that way? That doesn't make any sense. So then it took another story that came in where it was just a guy who lived in like a cabin in the woods, and it's a snowstorm, and he doesn't believe in God. He doesn't believe in religion. He's like, it's totally stupid that a guy would come down from heaven and die for us. It's totally dumb. Why would he ever do that? And then a bird was like trying to get out from the cold and kept hitting his window. And it was like, I can't get in. I can't get in. I can't get in. And the guy's like, you stupid bird, you can't do it that way. You're going to hurt yourself. That's not the way to do it. You can't get out like that way. You're just going to kill yourself here. And he's talking to this bird in English. And turns out birds don't speak English. They don't understand. And so he's like, no, bird, no. And he's like, gosh, if I can't help this bird, if only I could turn into a bird, then I could speak bird to him. And then he could understand, don't hit the window. And then right there, he's like, oh, I get it. Okay. He had to come down to speak bird because we were hitting our own window. Okay. How am I supposed to get to understand a 3D if I'm 2D or even 5D and 3D? You won't understand it. So even if we construct a model for you to at least grasp the concept, you're not gonna. And so this was really tricky for a lot of people to go like, well, if God said it's going to be this way, then blah, blah, blah. And we turn this 3D, 4D, 5D image into a 2D image so that we can conceive it. But I would almost venture, like right now, when is end of days? I really think that like Jesus is like, I explained the model. Now I just have to wait for people to evolve far enough to get it. Like it's there. Can you get it? Like it's right. Here it is. But then people are going to go through their own evolution of goofing this thing up until they start finding the love aspect of it. Which again, I loved on that movie was the concept that love is the only thing that transcends time, space, gravity. Love is the only thing that like we can't quantify that does seem to transcend all known measurements. And that again goes into, well, if God is love, that means that he would transcend all measurement systems that we can conceive. So how do you explain a 5D or 6-dimensioned creature, something that's beyond any of our comprehension, to something that lives in 2D? How do we do that?
I love that analogy. I'm going to throw another wrinkle on it.
Let's wrinkle it.
As I said, God is love, God is light, and God is consuming fire. Let's set aside that consuming fire because it's not what most people think. But for God is light and God is love. Love is one of the highest frequency emotions there is, right? We don't see the spirit because it's vibrationally very high, but the coffee cup I'm holding, Einstein said that everything is energy. Now matter will transform into, or energy will transform into matter and then back into energy again. It's that perpetual transformation of energy. But my coffee cup, you can see it because it's vibrating, like everything vibrates, everything is energy, but it's much more dense and slowly. So having said that, the other thing that God said is, I am light. Again, that's what Einstein said. Everything is made up of light energy. You are a light being. Did you ever see the movie Cocoon years and years and years ago? Well, those were light beings, and I haven't seen it in quite a while, but I remember when they stripped off their little earth suit, and they were just light beings. In many ways, I think that's who we are. But God said, I am love, I am light. Now, in the quantum physics realm, which I dig on quantum physics, I cannot tell you that I can explain everything I know, or everything that I necessarily believe. But if you want to geek out with quantum physics with me someday, we should do that. But the quantum realm tells us amazing things like one particle can be in more than one place at the same time. I can't explain that, but it builds my faith because Jesus walked through walls. Well, we could too with our, glorified bodies, whatever they look like. But in the quantum realm, there's more distance between two particles. There should nothing be holding them together. So of course, if he could walk through walls, and so can we. But the wrinkle that I wanted to add had to do with love. Why he came down and spoke bird with us. I love that. But did you know that every single religion has an angry God that you have to appease? I don't care if you're throwing a virgin in a volcano. I don't care if you're in Central America where they have all of these, very steep pyramids, and you would rip the hearts out of your enemies and offer that to the gods, whether you sacrifice babies. Every single religion in the world have an angry God that you have to do something to appease. So what if Jesus came to earth knowing that man is wired that way to believe that God is angry, and he certainly seems that way in the Old Testament, killing everybody, with the flood and all this stuff that it's probably not a good translation. We can get in some church history, but probably would take us further away from where we want to go. What if Jesus came to say, I am not that angry God. My daddy is not that angry God that you think he is. And to prove it, I'm going to let you do your worst to me. And I'm going to love you and forgive you from the cross while you're doing it. Wouldn't that, he laid his life down, nobody took it from him. Wouldn't that be a picture of God's love? Rather than, well, God has loved me if I do the 10 commandments, and God will love me if I tithe, and God will love me if I'm there every time the door is open. My husband and I did that. It's a quick way to burn yourself out and wonder why you're just in a different rat cage, different rat roll. But what if God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son? Forget the perishing part, because we're all we're all dying the moment we're born. But what if in that one act, God could show us the ultimate act of love? You think I'm this way and that you have to sacrifice. Well, okay, sacrifice me. Sacrifice me. We've all heard God's open. How much does God love you? Well, he opened his arms this wide, What if during that ultimate act, he proved that there's nothing you can do that makes me not love you? I don't care what you believe. I don't care what you do to me. I don't even care what you do to other people, because I know it's done out of a wounded heart. And someday when you finish up this life, as messy or as beautiful as you make it, it can be whatever we want it to be. Like you said earlier, we can make some choices. Everything is a choice. But what if when you finish this life and you come back to me, you're going to love me even more because I loved you through your mess? It's like a coin. I've got it's a Thomas Jefferson dollar bill here, much smaller than the old dollar bills. If I drop this in the mud and the dirt, is it any less valuable? No. So a person can be living a really atrocious life and not practicing any of the love principles that's going to make their life better and the lives of those around them. But they're not doing it because they woke up that day wanting to be the worst badass sinner there ever was. No, they woke up that day, perhaps in some bad situations, and they're just trying to get through their day. And they're so wrapped up in themselves, they don't know they're hurting you. They don't really care that they're hurting you because their pain is so loud. God loves that person just as much as he loves me and just as much as he loves you, because he knows that guy in the bus is just trying to figure it out while his kids tear the bus down around him. His perspective is perfect. Ours isn't. So it's hard for us to love like God loves. But what if that was the message of the cross? Not that God had to die so that we could be saved and go to heaven and not go to hell. What if it's just to say, I'm not who you think I am. I am loving regardless of what you do to me. Do your worst, and I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to love you. That's the God we serve.
Yeah, I had the same issue. I was very blessed. There's a pastor, rest in peace, like Pastor Thomas. He was a Navy SEAL and Army Ranger Special Ops combat instructor.
Like him already.
Yeah, and then he became a pastor afterwards, which I trained with him for about 7 years. It was mostly him and I until people started catching on what we were doing. And he'd come over and he would go through like Bible history and show why this painting proved that this was the time. And he was really fascinating into learning all this stuff. He was an older Korean guy. He was a small dude too. He was like 5'5" and like $130. He was a small guy, but I've seen him take guys that are 230 pounds and 6'3" and put them on their knees with 2 fingers. He was amazing. And, let's see. I remember when I told him this stuff, I'm like, listen, I'm the dirty coin. It doesn't make any sense to me. I was in my early 20s at the time. And I'm like, man, I screwed up so much. I came from an abusive home, came from a tough area. I lived in Detroit. I was not in a sweet town. And it was a tough area, tough everything. I didn't care. I was like, man, I screwed up so much. And there's 1,000 rules in this stupid thing. There's no way I'm keeping up with them. What's the point? And he said, it's not about you have to do all the rules right. God just wants you to keep trying, man. Just he didn't make you to not make a mistake. Just keep trying. Like, oh man, I learned a lesson there. Let me try and get better. And oh man, I messed that one up, but let's try and get better from there. And oh, that's a lesson learned the hard way. Let's go ahead and improve from that point. It's like he didn't tell you to be perfect, or he would have made you not able to mess up. He just wants to know, are you going to choose to keep trying to do better, or are you going to keep trying to do worse? Just which one are you trying? How are you, which way are you going to put your energy into? Improving or excuses? Which one is it going to be?
Let's talk about forgiveness for a little bit.
I like this. And this became a 2-hour debate for my guys. It was very funny.
I've heard different versions of this, but I think it was a Buddhist, and I don't remember who the guru was, but he said that unforgiveness is like picking up a hot coal from the fire intending to throw it at your enemy. But as long as you're holding on to that hot coal, you're the one who's getting burned. You know, other people have said it's like a poison that you're drinking, hoping the other person dies. When we don't choose to live better, by whatever scale you want to use, we're hurting ourselves. But God is never going to leave us, forsake us. You know, He's right there with us in our mess. I don't care if you've had an abortion, if you've killed somebody, or if you make your living by ripping people off. You are doing those things because that's what was modeled for you. That's where you found your acceptance. That's where you found your love and appreciation from your people. We're social animals. We want to have community. And if that's where you found your community that are so drugged up, doped up, that you've got to do these things to do your habit, God doesn't withdraw His love and say, clean yourself up, then I'll give you a better life. He is always the source and the impetus of any change we want to make. Now, it's still our choice because He's a whosoever will God. So we're going to either live a probably shortened life by living on the streets and making those choices. But I believe that it doesn't matter how old you are. Again, you can have some Nordic blonde in your hair or a whole lot of it. You can choose to wake up and say, you know what, enough is enough. I'm going to learn. You keep referring to some spiritual laws. I refer to them as universal laws because they're like gravity. We all know gravity. Doesn't matter if you're a 1-year-old. If you get to the edge of a cliff and fall off, God, spirit, universe, I don't mind any of those terms, is not going to say, oh, he didn't understand gravity, I guess he's not going to die. Gravity is there for our benefit. But if we misuse it or try to break the rules of gravity, it has consequences. That's all. In fact, I wrote a book, Christian Mindfulness and Universal Bible-based universal laws, because a lot of Christians are rejecting the very things that would help them, but because they're said in the woo-woo world or Eastern religion. So I take these principles and find Bible scriptures for them and explain they're just using the same concept, different words. You know, we have our church language, they have their language. But when you become aware of universal laws or spiritual laws like you're talking about, then you can start cooperating with them because you're not going to break them. They're going to work regardless. In fact, we're already using them to create the lives we have. Giving and receiving, sowing and reaping is one of those spiritual laws. That's because there's a law of circulation. If your blood doesn't circulate, Rick, you're dead. If you're not circulating the air inside your lungs where you're inhaling and exhaling, you're dead. Those are laws that we either cooperate with and have a healthy body, have a healthy life. Money has to circulate. If you hoard your money and you're afraid to spend it, you're like stepping on that garden hose and you're cutting off supply. That's not something I learned naturally based on my Depression era parents and the good that they tried to teach me. So I was afraid to spend, even when I had money. I didn't understand the healthiness of the economy and how everybody benefits if I, spend my $10. My $10 is going to help me much anyway. I might as well bless somebody with it. So if I'm paying groceries to the person to the line ahead of me, even though I would like somebody to buy my groceries, it's all good because every joint supplies. And there is no such thing as you being separate from me, not in a quantum realm at least. So with the spiritual rules, it's merely taking a look at the things found in the Bible that we maybe didn't look at a certain way, like forgiveness, like, the power of polarity. And we get that and we do all sorts of strange things with it. But in every space, there's going to be the positive and the negative. So you have this positive thought and immediately comes this negative thought. We will say, well, that's the devil fighting us. No, that's the law of polarity, saying that every space you got both things occupying. I set before you life and death. Choose life. It's right there in the scriptures and we missed it.
I love it. Yeah, I like your rants that you go on. You go in. I just gotta go that way, Shelly, and you're going. Get them.
I had a come to Jesus meeting in my backyard when things went to hell in a handbasket. over and over and over. And I'm finally wise up and say, there's a pattern here. Maybe I ought to figure out what's going on. So I decided I don't care. Just like that moment when I said, okay, when God said, you pray to me, but you don't even know me. And I said, well, that's changed. To say, you know what, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to dig in and I'm going to learn, because the latter half of this woman's life is going to be better than the former half. And it is, because you get free inside. You just get to stop
I'm with you.
focusing on the minors.
I think it's wonderful. And I like the direction you're going, because you're actually doing one of my philosophies, the ones that we have in the Warrior's Way. I really do encourage everyone to challenge everything. Ask the questions, but then not only ask the questions, have the courage to answer them.
Absolutely.
And this is where I think people goof up. I've noticed, especially when I work with people on mental health, that they're asking the right questions, but don't answer them. Why is this happening to me? It's a good question. Why is it happening to you? What's going on here? What are you doing? What's happening around you? Where are you choosing to be? What are the decisions you're making on how to handle it? Why is it happening to you? It's a good question.
Very good question.
Oh, why is my marriage falling apart? Why don't they get it? Well, that's a good question. Why is your marriage falling apart? And is it something they don't get? Let's look in. Let's see what's the part they're not getting. What are they supposed to get? Are you teaching something? How well are you teaching it for them to get it? What is the thing?
Absolutely. It's like reading a self-help book and then closing it and saying, okay, I got that, and never applying anything that they tell you.
Well, it's information versus transformation.
Absolutely.
I think that's the world we're in right now, is everyone's doing high ticket for information, but people aren't even challenging to see if it's transformation. Yeah. And this is something where it makes me happy with the world that we're in right now, honestly. People are going to very much saturate and screw this up really, really bad. Good. Because we're going to find the cream will rise to the crop, and that'll make a difference for people.
The cream does rise to the top, but you know what? God is not up there wringing his hands. Oh, my goodness, what am I going to do? He's in perfect peace, perfect love, perfect joy.
It's supposed to happen this way. This will work out. This is how that's supposed to go for this. It really is. This is one of those things where I talk with a lot of people who are psychologists, and a lot of the people who are very good at their job are very good. This is one of my gifts too, is recognizing patterns. I just see the patterns over and over again, whether it's through Enneagram, whether it's through personality types, whether it's through coping mechanisms, whether it's through grieving styles. There's just patterns, the way people operate. Okay, you're doing the same thing that person did. I see that. There's patterns over and over and over again. And I'm 41. And I get the patterns pretty quickly. I'm very quick. You can listen to some of the ones where I'm talking to people, and I catch it very fast. And I'm 41. Imagine I've seen every single person who's ever existed always and caught the patterns. What are the odds of being wrong when you made the thing and you know what the patterns are because you've seen billions of them?
Yeah.
The information there, it's going to be you think you guys are really shocking me right now? And this is where I don't pretend. I don't. As far as faith goes and religion goes and the stuff that the church will do, which you've made great points, which we didn't get into half of them, everything from religious guilt, the abuse of the church, how fear was designed to sell tickets far more than to teach love and God. There's a lot of pieces of stuff that we went through here. The spirit being a feminine word, I've never heard that before. Rewiring subconscious, I could talk with on days. I've got lots of notes that you just fire off bombs left and right here, Shelly. I'm man, we could go probably let me check my schedule. We got 6 more hours here to unpack all these things. So it's really great to hear these different things that you've done. I do want to get a little bit more also into how you're doing your mission right now. You've got a mission to be able to, you said, help women, get out of the religious confusion and the abuse, but you're also not just talking, you're also doing action. And can you talk about some of the action stuff that you're doing too? The things that you these are the ways that I make things happen, the rides that you do and the places you've been and the way you've done stuff.
Sure. It's not just women, and it's not just women from religious abuse. However, I have found that they are a ready-made market because I can speak their language. I'm very passionate. Since you saw some patterns, maybe you picked up on that. So I have my books. I have, the normal things that you're taught to do to build a business, the social media, the workshops, webinars. I'm doing whatever I'm inspired to do to try to get the word out there that you don't have to stay where you're at. Join the Chamber of Commerce, and they want you to do that 30-second commercial of, who you are, who you help. And I've got that little, I'm Shelly Settles, your mentor for breakthrough. I help women, primarily those 40 and older, identify and break through their limiting or perceived beliefs and, emotional roadblocks and blah, 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 blah. But when you make that connection one-on-one to that woman who is putting on her plastic smile and acting like everything's okay, you don't need any of that stuff. All you need is to be able to have that conversation. So where she feels safe enough. In fact, I have a private Facebook group that's a safe space for you, because there are a lot of women who, and I'm not talking about those who are just, in a bad marriage or bad relationship and they're going to beat up their boyfriend. There's an emotional toll just to admit that you don't have it all together. There's an emotional toll just for you to be super honest with yourself and maybe one other person. I'm a very safe person. I'm not going to judge you for, anything that you've done. But when you provide that safe space for them to start asking those questions of themselves, you start that dialogue and that conversation going. I don't mind if I'm speaking to, 600 people in front of them on a stage or one-on-one. Most of my work is one-on-one, because the people that I work with, they don't need to hear the religious platitudes. They need to hear something that is a very deep work that's gonna give them that hope to latch on to. So that's where I've gravitated to. I haven't set out to do that, but those are the people that I have the biggest affinity for, because I know how hard it was to make transformation happen by yourself. You're never by yourself. God's always with you. Again, whether you claim yourself to be a believer or not, he's always urging you on. But it can be a very deep work that we can kid ourselves with, because we read some books. Oh yeah, this is great. Then you're on to the next book. You think you're making progress, but you're not changing any of that programming that wasn't even yours in the beginning. It was installed in you by the dysfunctional programming of your parents, your caregivers, your loved ones. You know this. Then we build on it. It's like, again, Ebenezer Screws. It's a laborious chain. You've built on it all these years. We're all like that, dragging our baggage through life. If I can get them to just cut off their baggage and drag a little less and realize how amazing they are, realize, man, God created them. A few years ago, when I was in high school, maybe more than a few years ago, the chemical makeup, we were worth a couple of bucks. Now with inflation, that would be about $30 in today's dollar. But if you were able to capture all of the energy in your cells, you're worth about $85 billion was the estimate I heard most recently. Well, absolutely every one of us is worth that. But we don't think that. We look at our bank account. We look at our limited friends that are fair weather friends anyway and leave in the first sign of trouble. We look at things and make those judgments about who we are based on external evidence, which is not evidence at all. Our eyes trick us. They lie to us. You can only go inside.
One of my
to find
guys
your
asked
truth.
that question. One of my guys asked that question one time. He's a worship leader in his church, but he was like, I got a question for you guys. Where does your worth come from?
Can't come from any external sources. Those are all temporary. They change.
Well, maybe. It's a really tricky question. I wish that it was just God, and I wish it was just me, or I wish it was just, my family, or I wish it was just my warriors who I train, or I wish it was my bank account, or I wish it was a service I provide, or I wish it was the way I serve, or I wish it was my purpose, or I wish there's too many pieces that you go like, well, it's getting more things that it was just that one thing. I wish it was just God. I wish that was it. But it's like, but it's also a part of what I do because there's a free will too. But there's also a part of who I serve.
That's your expression of who you are. If you take those things away, say suddenly you were wrongly convicted, now you're in prison and you can't do everything that you would normally do. Would you be any less of an individual? It has to come.
Well, it comes in multiple pieces. And that's kind of what I say, because you can still be the individual, whether you're incarcerated or not. But then how do you show your worth as a person who's incarcerated? Do you make things worse around you, or do you help the guys around you? Like, where does worth come from? It's a pretty tricky question.
That's demonstration of your worth. And yeah, it's a complicated question, but it has to come from within you, because if it comes from any external source, take it away, and then what are you left with? Now, those are components. You can get that mirrored back to you that you're a valuable individual. But if you don't think you're valuable and other people are around you tell you you're worth $1 million, if you don't believe it, you don't believe it.
I think that's one factor, because there's more to it. Because I had a sandwich thing for my worth. It ended up becoming like something higher than me. There was like more to God. There's a God, a spirit, there's an energy, there's something untangible that I perform service for or towards. I serve God. So that's one thing. But then I had my own needs and my own me stuff. And this comes into the belief systems that I have, my doubts, my fears, my distractions, my excuses, the way that I grieve, the way that I believe. I have to go through all the pieces that are like, okay, there's a service to myself here. And those were far more selfish. But then I also had a service to others. I've got my daughters. I've got my family. I've got my friends. I've got my guys who I take care of. I've got, people that I also serve. And what was ironic was how service meant two completely different things from top and bottom.
They're two sides of the same coin, though.
That's what it was. It's funny. I was serving God. So this is how I worship or serve God. But I also serve my people, but I perform a service for them. And it's the same word, but done very differently. But ironically, a lot of the words were the same for how I do it, just with a different part. So you're right. It's the two sides of the same coin. But it's ironic because the one in the middle was not done the same way as the one for the top and the bottom. That was the way that I found.
That one in the middle is how you serve yourself. You even said that's selfish. No, it isn't.
Okay. Well, the self-serving part.
Okay, but I don't
call it. Fair enough. And I agree with you. I do play with the semantics of words, so you are correct. I'll go with you there. It was self-serving then. And so then it looked like a lot of my value, at least my value that I consider my core values. One of mine did involve a high level of service, not only how I serve, but how I serve. And that's an interesting thing. How do I serve God, serve myself, and serve others? And that was an interesting thing to say. My worth does seem to come from the way that I give and the way that I take care of. And that was an interesting thing for my worth. Other people have found a very different definition of where does your worth come from. But it took me a few weeks of tackling into like 20 different layers of all these different avenues of father, of child, of son, of, faith and religion, to leader, and, how I build my business. Like there's all these different factors. So to say like your worth just comes from within only, I'm like, well, yes, it does. But also it's how I go outside of.
It's how you express also that worth. Yeah. Recently, I've been a hospice volunteer, and not an easy thing to do, but something that is tremendously rewarding, because everybody deserves to know that they're loved, even if they're in a situation where they're, bedridden and can't feed themselves, and, the whole excuse me. Not sure where that came from. Hopefully you can edit that out.
It came from the inner spirit.
It came from the inner spirit. I have to go back to that tea analogy that I mentioned doing in front of my class, and I was talking about our identity in Christ. We don't say that that's hot water and tea anymore. That hot water has taken on all the characteristics of that tea bag, from the flavonoids to the color to the aroma to the taste, everything. And you can take the tea bag out, but that water is still that tea. That's why I said your worth comes from inside of yourself, because number one, you have to acknowledge it. Every good thing becomes effectual by the acknowledging of every good thing within you. But all you were really telling me, or at least what I was hearing, was how your worth expressed itself, either in your service to God or in your service to other people. It started out from you inherently knowing that you are a worthwhile individual, you have a gift, and your greatest joy and your greatest pleasure is to share that gift with others, to help bring them up to where they can understand that they have a measure of control over their life that they're probably not tapping into because no one told them that they could. No one told them how to improve their self-image, to get over the overwhelm. No one showed them how to put universal laws in practice so they will benefit themselves. We're all just kind of like thrown out, work it out, make it work. And if you don't know, you're just going to do what you see other people do. And that means the 97% are living like just getting by, living every day. You're one of the 3% that has found something and you're sharing it. Now, they can choose not to, or they can choose to accept it and want more. That's all I'm trying to do, is put myself in their path. So if they want more, I'm not feeding them with fire hose. Might be a little temptation of mine, but it's just to let them know that they have choice. Isn't that your book? Everything is a choice. Yeah, they have a choice.
I really liked how you just broke that down. It's kind of fun to be on the receiving end of that. That's usually what I do to people. So I'm like, okay, this is lovely. It actually made me smile a little, for like, I see how far you've gone, but challenge it a step further. And I really love that you did that. So thank you. So I like the way that you broke it down to say, well, even the way that you see the external, which is how you serve God and serve others, still comes from a self-awareness of your internal and your value that you express. Is that the fair way that you meant it?
I don't see how it could be otherwise. Otherwise, it's a works-based.
I like it. So that's really, I like that we're playing with such a limited, like our word vocabulary to explain such an important thing. So I like it. I really appreciate that. And it does give me like another layer there. It goes like, okay, even challenging it in my head, it does seem like it's plausible. I'm like, okay, this does seem to make sense the way she's breaking it down, because I was trying to apply a form of external to something that still has to filter through me to be of service, which means, does it come from me only? Well, yes, but kind of no.
How can it come from you only? You're that T. God is God is in you.
So it's like I'm being funneled, so my worth would come from, like, the purpose of God creating me is for me to be able to perform works and like express my works towards others. Like, I'm trying to make sure I get the words are really limiting me right now on how to express this advanced concept.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily use that vernacular. I don't know who to attribute it to, so it's mine now. God came down and had a human experience so that we learn how to have a divine, godlike experience.
Fair enough.
Right down to our ability to create. We create with the mind. We create with our imagination. We create with the male, female part of us, that we started out talking about. We are made in his image and his likeness. Of course we create. That's why we've been creating our world the way we've been creating it. Haphazard for most of us, because we haven't understood, the things that if we knew, we could create with more intention and have more of a life that we would like to have, instead of just taking the deck of cards that we were held. We've all heard that. Well, I just wasn't given a very good hand of cards. You got to play what you got. Well, yes and no. You can certainly learn that you have other options, but you got to raise your awareness before you know you have other options.
Well, now you're speaking my language again. It's the first tool that I teach is awareness. So, like, you're very right. Without that, you can't make a choice you don't know exists. So I do agree. And even at the core of all of my training, even my map tools and things that I create, the core is the beliefs. Our beliefs are at the core of everything. It's not religious belief. It's belief in who are we and what's our value inside of us. And this determines potential, because all of the potential is limited by the limiting beliefs we create.
Absolutely.
Which usually were given in by the belief systems that were passed down. Even the best intentions create generational curses.
Absolutely.
So, I think we're speaking the same language,
We are.
and I am processing on that belief part for like, does your worth come from the belief that you are given all of this from God so you can create? Like, I'm putting the pieces together here for like, something's working through and or out of me. And does it come from me, or does it come from God and he made me to create? Like, I'm playing with the way you're trying to say it. I don't think that you're off. I think it's another layer, but it merits being able to unpack. I like it. I'll dig in a little further because I'm going to take it that direction, and I bet I'll find where it is. But thank you for that. I appreciate that. That's
Sure.
very great. Thank you, Shelly. Yeah, this is very cool. Did you want to share anything on like the motorcycle riding or the travel part? Did you want to do that?
I love to travel, and it's a simple story. My husband has ridden on and off over the years, and whenever I'd ride behind him, your view is the helmet ahead of you. You know, you're always got to be this way or always got to be that way. And 6 months of that, I said, screw this. I want my own bike. So I originally had a different bike, loved it. But when we decided to go to Panama, we lived down there about a year, and Ken was just missing the bikes. So we flew up one way, had to buy new bikes. So I sold my bike, bought a better bike for the roads down there. No bueno, many of the roads. So I got a V-Strom 650, and I've taken it all over the United States. We rode it down to Panama, lived there another year or so. Right before COVID, just kind of felt that nudging, that urging to come back to the States, not knowing anything about COVID, not knowing about anything. And our son had been saying, why don't you guys, I got a big house. I just built this big house. Why don't you come, stay with me, figure out what you want to do, but come home. And so we finally made that choice, and we weren't up here 10 days before he had got a job offer to move to Utah, where I currently reside. So at that moment, it's like, now I know why we came back, because he needed all this help to sell his house and to do all the things that have to be done. And it was just fun on the bikes, though, because we got to stop in Honduras for 2 weeks and teach English to some, grade school kids and just sample life as other cultures live it. And I love that. I mean, I've been to the Philippines, I've been to Russia, I've been, all over Latin America. And when you get out of your little bubble and your little world, you'll see a couple of things. People everywhere are just doing what they know how to do to survive. Their culture is different, doesn't make it wrong. Like Latin America, one of the ingrained things in the culture is it's very social. I mean, you'll just talk to people. And so what if you're not being productive? Americans go down there and say, well, why don't you get a vacuum cleaner? It'd be so much more efficient. They don't care about efficiency. They care about the social aspect. There's no lawnmowers down there. At least we saw very few of them. The people cut them with weed whackers. It's not wrong, but Americans go down there and make those judgments. So I love traveling abroad and seeing these different cultures, because it gives me that little mental check that everybody's doing what they know how to do. There's no wrong, there's no right, there's no judgment involved. It would help everybody out there in America now who's cranky about what we have or don't have, if they just saw perspective from some people who truly don't have much. When you see people digging through garbage dumps to try to find enough to survive and live on, it changes you, and it ought to change you. So yeah, ride the bike, because you can smell every barnyard you pass. You can just really get in touch. There's not these false structures and false walls that we have when you're hemmed in with a car. Now, I talk like I'm really a hardcore biker. I'm not. If it's going to mess up my hair, I would never ride my bike to school. My husband would ride his bike to school, but I'm teaching that day. I don't want my hair all helmet hair for the day. So, I'm not that hardcore of a biker, I'm told, but it's fun. It's just fun.
That's fun. Yeah, I like what you said, like also the roads, no bueno on the roads. I went to Costa Rica this year, and I was down there, and like they don't service the roads. And there are certain motorcycles you won't take on those roads because it's like giant craters through the whole thing. And so No, it's fun, but you were right. The culture there, the pura vida, that was like the whole thing,
Pura
the pure
vida.
life.
Yeah, the pure life.
And so it was beautiful there, and it was very different culturally. Like it seemed like the whole country would go to the beach for sunset, and that was like culture. It wasn't about efficiency; it was about connection, and I like that too. So I love that, like looking into the different cultures around and go like, are we really right because we've only seen one way?
No.
And it's like if you go other places, it turns out there's more ways.
Yeah, it's a very myopic view, and I get why Americans are sometimes bashed overseas because we have a certain amount of arrogance. But again,
people are doing the best with what they know.
People are doing the best with what they know. Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is pretty great. I appreciate you very much. Shelly, now that I know you much better, I feel like we need to hang out more.
I would love that. How do we do that, Rick?
So let's do another episode coming up within the next month or so. Let's do some more of this because I feel like we could talk for another 3 hours and would be just fine. But I know that I got a long day. I got another appointment in 15 minutes. So I want to book far more time with you.
Well, I would love that. Now,
next time.
You started saying that we were going to do some exercises. Do we have time for that, or do you want to put that off for our next?
Well, my appointment is date night, which I hold sacred.
Hey.
But she's not home yet, so she texted me she's on her way, but I wanted to get dinner ready for her. So
you are
do
a
I
nice
have time?
Man.
Do I have time? I do have time. But she's also because last date night I went above and beyond, and she's like, you don't have to do that again. We can stay home this time. Just do something nice at home. I'm like, you sure? Because I really enjoyed last date night. It was really fun to me. So we go back and forth planning date night, and this is my week. So, but she was like, can we stay home this time? And I was like, I can cancel some stuff, sure.
I like the fact that you are working on your relationship and protecting that at all costs. Good for you.
Well, we found out that there was because we're workaholics, and she works a lot of hours and I work a lot of hours, and so we had to take back our Wednesday, and so we changed Wednesday from Wednesday to We Need Us Day.
Oh,
and so this is our day, and the kids go to their dads because I'm a stepdad. The kids go to their dads, and this is our day where we go. This is just you and me. Usually I would work until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, nope, not on Wednesday. We Need Us Day.
I like that.
And so we have made that sacred. But do I have time to play with some words? I do love it. You mentioned a couple words earlier that I wanted to get into, and I think next time we could play a lot more fun with this. All right, you talked about expanding or dying, like how plants and how we go, but you talked about the word happiness, and I've done webinars and I've done speeches on happiness, and I would love to hear your definition. Shelly Settles, what the heck? If I'm trying to look for happiness, talk to me as though I've never heard of this, and I want to know, how do I find it? What do I do?
This is not a game. That's a loaded question.
Maybe. I don't know. Let's see. I mean, I didn't start with love. That's even crazier.
Love to me is a little bit easier to nail down because we all know what love is supposed to be. But happiness,
I don't.
Well, yeah, you do, because it was modeled for you. Thinking just as high, if not higher, of other people, which doesn't mean you're a worm, but you're valuing that person. That's love. Now, happiness is a little bit more nebulous in my own mind because, again, Lamborghini, Maserati, you think that's going to make you happy. You're not happy with your current spouse. You think you're going to get another honey and you'll be happy with that one. No, because you're bringing yourself into that equation. So happiness has to come from the inside, and it's usually found with a whole lot less contraption and stuff. We moved from California to Florida many moons ago, and we got rid of most of our stuff before we moved. Frankly, because we couldn't afford the U-Haul trailer out of California, to take it all the way to Florida at that time. it was so freeing not to be tied down to stuff. That to me was happiness for a little bit, but then you get your stuff back. So was that really happiness? It's a very nebulous term to me. But happiness in the short definition is, if you lost everything, would you be happy with yourself? If you're happy with who you are and your intimacy and relationships, whether that's to God, maybe you've lost your spouse even. You can't find your happiness in your spouse. Has to, again, be with who you are. And that has to be with your vertical alignment. So happiness to me is not stripping away everything, but you can identify happiness when you strip everything away. Because if you really like yourself, you don't need all that other stuff, that accoutrement, that beautiful babe hanging off your arm, or that ripped young man, if, I could be a cougar, you don't need all that stuff, because you're waking up with yourself, you're going to bed with yourself. You got to be happy with yourself. And so stripping some of those external things away just helps you fine tune who you really are. Because if you're not happy when those things are stripped away, are you angry with yourself? Are you blaming yourself? Are you clenching your jaw for 2 years straight? Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Are you so into your head that you can't tap into your heart? Those are clues, Rick. And when you pay attention to those clues, it also maps out how you get happy. And that's self-acceptance. It's realizing that you are beloved of Daddy God. You can't do anything to mess that up, and you can't do anything to make him love you anymore. Every parent ought to know that, even though there might be days where you look at your child or you look at your spouse and you say, I don't even know you. That's just passing time.
That's pretty good. All right, so for me to do it, I want to be happy with myself. Now, this gets into the self-worth aspect, and I know I teach doubt and I teach these pieces. Well, what if I'm not happy with myself? How do I do it? Do I just have to get rid of my stuff?
No, I'm just saying that gives you a litmus test. I believe in stuff because they're tools. It's like money is a tool. It's not the root of all evil. It's a tool. Mm-hmm. It's freedom. Sure. You can't pay for the groceries of the person in the line ahead of you if you don't have something in your pocket. But as a tool, just like stripping away things, that was just a tool. That was just a litmus test for me to find out, what am I basing my happiness in? I don't need those external things. I'm going to wake up with myself and I'm going to go to bed with myself. I'm going to evaluate that day. Did I let God's love flow through me to others? Did I take some for myself? Did I realize that I was held in his embrace and that I can't muck that up? And notice I said M with a muck. But it's the same.
Yeah, better than me.
Same concept, though, because we all have those thoughts and those things in our head. Do you hold on to them and make that part of your identity? Or you just release it because, you know what? It's just a thought. That's not who I really am. Mm-hmm. So who I really am is a happy, worthwhile human being that might have moments of something that triggers that, and then I deal with it.
So this is your belief system around self.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's
so then who we are then would be the culmination of our belief systems. And if our belief system says we are happy, then we are.
Yes and no. Because our belief systems change. Does that mean that you change because your beliefs change? No, the expression of you changes because your belief system changes. But that real you, that essence of who you really are is that spirit that God has deposited, his spirit in every one of us. That's who you really are. That's what's going to return to God.
I like that you keep using this term expression of you. Like that's such an interesting way I've heard you explain that. Like, it's not like this is what I've chosen to do. This is an expression of me. And, whether it's the same definition or it is meant differently, but you're like, if your belief systems change, do you change? You said no, but your expression of you does. That's a really interesting way that you're using the words there. Like, I feel like I get it, but I want you to explain it as though I don't get it, because I like what you're doing. So if I said, I'm just doing an expression of me, would this mean that this is choice? Or would this mean that this is identity? Or would this mean that it's belief? Or does it mean all?
Yeah, I'm not sure we need to splinter it anymore, because I think it is all. Your beliefs drive your actions and your behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your beliefs drive your thoughts even, because if you're an optimist, you're going to have more positive thoughts than a pessimist would. So that's your programming. You can change your programming.
Mm-hmm.
Simple, not easy. Sometimes it helps to not be doing it by yourself, because you can get off in the woods and, get into self-condemnation and am I doing this right? And, all of that stuff. But who you really are wouldn't change if you went to Costa Rica and stayed there 10 years and learned Spanish. And now you decide, I'm not talking English anymore. I'm just going to talk Spanish. The expression, the whole culture expressed in that language is now coming out of you, but it didn't change you. So we can express ourselves many ways. Some days I have a business suit on and I'm expressing myself like a businesswoman. Other times I have my pastor's hat on and I'm doing some one-on-one deep counseling and helping people get over the crapola that they sat under for so long and believed was true because they were told it was true. And I empower them. I'm wearing different hats, but it's still me. So my beliefs drive that. My language and word choices color that in. But it's all coming from one source. And that one source is not separated from God. It cannot be separated from God. In him we live and move and breathe and have our being. In us, he lives and moves and breathes and has his being. Like that.
Mm-hmm. I asked one time, I did a survey, if people believe that people change. And it was a very mixed answer for, do people change? Once a cheater, always a cheater, those kind of things. Like, do people change? And people would say, no, I don't think people really change. But then I asked the same question and just changed the word to evolve. Do you believe people evolve? And they were like, oh, yeah, definitely. People evolve into the better versions of them. Oh, yes, absolutely. There's evolution for us. We change into something we evolve, of course. And it's funny, it was the same word. If you think about it, like, is evolve or change really that different? But the connotation, one is associated to loss and one is associated to progress. But it's the same thing. You're still doing the same thing. It's just how it's interpreted. Mm-hmm. And that's why words are so funny to me. And I like that you're using, like, still you, just expressing differently.
Absolutely. Now, my husband and I have been married. I ask him, he knows like this, but I want to say 46, 47 years. But we'll often joke.
We can round it.
Yeah, it's close enough. We often joke and say, but we're not the same people. And that is very, very true. Because one of us wouldn't be alive if we were still the same people. Because we knew nothing. And I don't know what you believe in prophetic words and all of that. You can kind of get it behind it from a secular angle or from a religious angle, but we were called out in front of God and everybody in a church with a prophet saying that the final picture of my husband and I were a finely tuned team of black horses pulling together. But the current picture was a broken down donkey and a broken down ox, broken down donkey and a broken down ox. And I knew instantly in my mind, well, I'm the ox, because if anything has to be done around here, I'm the one that does it. And that makes him the broken down. And then I use the biblical word ass in my mind to describe my husband. Now, we would not stay married, or even one of us not having killed the other person, if we didn't evolve and didn't change. So happens we're both stubborn people, and we said, I do, and that's what we meant. So,
if you're both stubborn, which one was really the ass?
Oh, he was.
Oh, for sure.
He was. I haven't changed my mind on that. But we're so much closer to that finely tuned team of black horses. Now, do we always pull in the same direction equally? Does anybody really equally? Mm-hmm. And what does that look like?
Right.
So anyway, it's all good. That's why I'm so proud isn't the right word, because we don't have that relationship, but I'm so enamored with the idea of you having your date night with your sweetie. That's so important.
Yeah, no, we make sure we do this. And yeah, we're doing a much better job of making sure that we give like the true proper time to each other. So we do hold it pretty sacred. We made sure we had a couple of tough moments where we worked so much, and I would, I challenge her on her stuff because she does have a system where she will distract herself with work to not have to go through the stuff that sucks in here.
Oh, a lot of people do that.
She's gonna, that's her coping system is I will just work, because that's safety, security, and production. I will be creating achievements, and achievement give me love, and I will be loved by what I do, and so that was her system. And so I remember sitting there going, babe, don't you realize how much we're working? When was the last time we had like a good you and me talk? And it was one of those things where she couldn't even pick the month. And I was like, we're going to need to work on that because I'm a step parent here, which means if we're not okay, I don't get to take any of these with me.
Right.
So we need to be okay here.
Right.
Because I'm here taking care of people, but the reason that I'm here taking care of people isn't being taken care of. We need to take care of us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, yeah, we made it a priority.
That's something that, you can see in workaholics, but you can also see it in people who are so into escapism. They want to watch TV. Mm-hmm. They want to watch movies. They want to always have noise on, radio on. It's because they can't handle the quiet because then those things bubble up from inside.
This is the premise. This is the premise from my next book, actually. It's the combination of how we do our coping with our denial system in comparison to the enemy within, which I do create it as separate, and I don't use the devil. It's like, no, there's just different strategies that come in. And distraction plus denial. And this is where if you look at the behavior for it, and this, I've got, pages on this anyways, but if you put, I don't want to deal with the reality of what my existence is, and with, I want anything that makes me feel good at all, regardless of the cost. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be drinking. It could be eating sweets, social media, binge watching, prescription drugs, shopping, video games, porn, busy work, or more work. You go ahead and pick your distraction. It's all going to make you feel good. And it doesn't matter what the cost of it is. It's going to end up costing you a lot more. Yeah. But if you mix together the coping mechanisms with denial and you put that into retreat, hide, suppress, you go ahead and use that system and then put that in. I need to feel good because I don't want to deal with the reality of feeling bad. Well, that's the recipe for addiction. And that's also when we go in and we start attacking the denial system and we work in through their grieving cycles and their coping mechanisms first, and then deal with the distractions, it ends up making it so they no longer need the distractions because they don't have to cope anymore. The thing that we rip the roots out. And this has helped us with addiction. This has helped us with depression. This has helped us with anxiety, and we're beating those things from the core. And a lot of times people are treating symptoms and they won't do the work because it takes work to get to the root.
Yeah, it is work. It is work. Mm-hmm. But I tell you what, it's like ripping that Band-Aid off and going, ow, for 2 seconds, or pulling every single individual hair. It's excruciating. Who wants to live like that?
Well, there's a David Goggins quote that I saw about visiting discomfort, and he talks about like workout. He goes to like the hour. I even say 30 minutes. Like, take care of yourself, even 30 minutes. Go for a walk today.
Absolutely.
Like, just take care of you just a little bit. But if you visit discomfort on purpose, you'll feel better for the rest of the day. But if you avoid visiting discomfort on purpose, you'll be uncomfortable the rest of the day.
Makes perfect sense. I would only add to that, don't let your discomfort define you. Just like
Interesting.
Just like your past doesn't need to define you. You are not your discomfort.
Yeah. I think this is my realm. We could go all day. And this one, we need to hang out more, Shelly. All right. So I'm going to wrap this up. In anything that you want to say, all right, I want to hear more Shelly. I want to see more Shelly. I need more Shelly. That settles. Where should they go? What should they do?
Because of this format, I'm not able to, drop a link or anything. So if they just DM me.
We can DM you. Where should we DM?
Yes.
We'll take care of your links for you.
Okay,
We'll make sure they have your
DM
links.
me in Facebook and say, hey, whatever your issue is, or just, hey, I heard you and I loved what you said, whatever. I am so open and genuine. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. If we have a little chat and I say I can help you, then I can help you. If I say, I can't help you, then that's what I'm going to say. So
that's the noise. If you hear that noise, she can't help you.
Because
oh no,
I can only bring the work that I've done. I can't go to a book and pull out somebody else's theory and try to help you with that. It's got to come from who I am and the things that I have learned over my life. But I tell you what, it was an intensive basic training. I do happen to be former military. I know what basic training's like. I went through my own boot camp of personal development because I thought that I was on the road for personal development. But I was one of those who have a bunch of books and you read them and you go, great stuff, and then not let it change your life. So they can DM me, Shelly Settles, in Facebook. I have a group for, women that are 40 plus. But I'm always out there just trying to make a difference on whatever their issues are. I don't have anything canned. I mean, I have a program, a process.
Sure. What if they want to check out your book or they want to get some of your stuff?
In fact,
how can they get your book?
We'll do this. I have a couple of books, but this is the one that I've gotten some great feedback on. This is the one that Christian mindfulness and Bible-based universal laws. It's going to offend the religious Christians because I'm okay with someone saying source or universe or God. I think he's big enough he can handle it. I don't think he's offended. But I have some codes, as long as they last, on Audible. If they want a free copy of it, just DM me and give me your email so I know where to send that link.
Listen, I want one of those codes, Shelly. I want one of those books.
Oh, by all means.
I'll send you mine. Let's do that. Listen, we'll switch it up.
Cool.
We're gonna be like, yeah, I very much enjoy this, and we'll get all your links and all your stuff, and we're gonna do some more. I want some more time with you.
I would love that, Rick.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And let's do more of this, and we'll have all of your links in the bio because I do want people to be able to get in touch with you. I think you have a lot of wisdom, and I can tell how you've applied challenge with practical application with the wisdom of like all the things you've looked into and how to apply it. I love it. And thank you for challenging me back. It shows your true warrior spirit, and I very much respect it.
Well, God bless you. Not that you need his blessing, because you already are blessed.
I already have it in me.
That's right. You already have it in you.
Already there. Thank you, Shelly.
Go enjoy your evening.
Also, let me give you another bonus of like minds. Here I've got my books and I've got my lion. And I see you've got your books and you've got your lion.
Yeah.
So well played. You said you were wearing your Nordic blonde. Yeah. I'm working on mine.
I see that.
Got mine coming in. You got your glasses today. I just feel like I'm looking into a mirror here.
Right back at you.
Thank you, Shelly. It's good to hang out with you, and we shall do some more in the future. Have an awesome night.
Thank you.
Click on the button and you can become the hero in your own story. It's time to start making the choices to change. And the evolution that you're going to do begins with choosing the next step. This is the way. And together, we're always stronger.